Our miracle planet is ever-changing. Over vast timescales, continents travel and climates swing, forcing all creatures to find original ways to survive. This is a journey to understand one force that shapes all life. Evolution, the life force of our planet. An ancient island where dinosaurs once ruled. And through a twist of fate, a castaway is stranded. This could be a horror story, where bizarre beasts take over. Or it could be a triumph of the mutants. Ultimately, this is the story of how an isolated island became a species factory, where evolutionary magic shaped the lives of all those marooned here. Darkness falls. These forests become a nightmare setting as a devil stages a ritual of lust, unleashing a sound from hell. Mutant underworld creatures emerge to hunt. These devils and goblins have ruled the dark forest for millions of years. But their power ends with dawn. At first light, the loudest call of any animal in Madagascar breaks the spell. The howler is an Indri. Indri look like monkeys. They are as agile as monkeys, but they are not monkeys. They are lemurs, which are prosimians, meaning pre-monkey, one of the most ancient primates on the planet. This vast extended lemur family is found only on the island of Madagascar. Madagascar is the world's fourth largest island, about the size of Spain. It lies in the Indian Ocean, about 500 kilometers east of Africa. Madagascar has been isolated from Africa for so long, it's sometimes called the eighth continent. It has earned a reputation as a species factory. It pumps out new models of lemurs, all perfectly adapted to survive Madagascar's many habitats. Many lemurs prefer wet tropical forests, where they commute along aerial highways. While many, like these brown lemurs, enjoy fruit, others eat bamboo, the forest's hardest rations. Bamboo lemurs are one of the very few primates to relish this tough plant. In the driest parts of the island live the charismatic ring-tailed lemurs. These very social lemurs live in large troops and travel over the dry ground as often as through the trees. Moms carry offspring on their backs, sometimes doing a carpool with other mothers' babies. Nearby, the side-winding sifaka line dance their way from one tree to another. At night, flying gremlins claim the forest. They are mouse lemurs, the smallest primates in the world. So small they can sit in the palm of your hand. They share the night with the one lemur that holds the secrets of Madagascar's ancient past. The eye hangs like a bat, with sinister-looking hands, and is the oldest of all living lemur species. This 7-year-old female lives a mainly solitary life in the dark of night. Her 2 middle fingers, much longer than the others, provide a kind of digital technology. The eye is a tap forager, and these long fingers are her eyes inside the wood. Like a carpenter tapping a wall to find a stud, she seeks hollows inside the tree. Her bat-like ears hear the telltale echo of a hollow chamber where dinner is hiding. And then, her sharp teeth go to work. Once she makes the hole, in go the extraordinarily long middle fingers, probing the interior like surgical instruments. The reward is insect larvae, rich in protein. The story of the Ai and her extended lemur family reflects Madagascar's sweeping journey through deep time. The first evidence of this island's big adventure begins with a tree. The baobab, which looks as if it is growing upside down, is one of the most bizarre trees on the planet. They may live for 2,000 years and are protected by tough, fire-resistant bark. Most Madagascan species live nowhere else, but ancient baobabs are the exception. They grow in Africa and as far away as Australia. How did this bizarre tree come to inhabit continents separated by vast oceans? The answer is to be found in the birth of Madagascar. 180 million years ago, Madagascar, Africa, and Australia were all joined as part of a supercontinent called Gondwana. The first baobab trees grew here. Around 140 million years ago, Gondwana began to break up. Split from Gondwana, Madagascar was attached to India. But over time, it slowly split from India and became an island. On its slow journey away from Gondwana, the new island carried baobab trees, along with other ancient creatures, including dinosaurs. But 65 million years ago, a cataclysm drastically changed the face of the world. An asteroid slammed into planet Earth with a force 1,000,000 times greater than any nuclear bomb, and triggered a wave of destruction. A thick cloud of dust fresh start. Some creatures survived and had one thing in common. They were small. The pill millipede, scorpions, stick insects, and the bizarre giraffe-necked weevil come from the insect survivors. As Earth's food chains recovered, smaller bodies requiring less food gave them an advantage. And these asteroid survivors thrived. Some forming bizarre partnerships. The common orchid has one of the strangest flowers in the world. Below the petals dangles a 30-centimeter long nectar tube, making it nearly impossible for any pollinator to reach the nectar at its base. But one manages to do so. On this island of mutants, a night-flying hawk moth craves orchids with plenty of nectar. Finding one, it unrolls an exceedingly long feeding proboscis, exactly the same length as the nectar tube. It's no coincidence. It's an exclusive partnership where for the price of a sweet treat, the hawk moth takes pollen only to other common orchids. On Madagascar, mutant tongues show the power of adaptation. The chameleon is the first of Madagascar's success stories. Over millions of years, this lizard evolved a range of functional adaptations. Like eyes which move independently, useful for spotting prey in front and behind. And a tongue, as long as its body and tail combined. This is the world's smallest reptile, the dwarf chameleon. Smaller than a matchbox. It is also one of the most ancient chameleons. Its DNA shows that all the world's chameleons first came from Madagascar. After the asteroid Armageddon, reptiles, amphibians, and bugs ruled Madagascar. No mammals lived here. But that was about to change. Against all odds, one lucky family of primates were about to land on this isolated island, somehow crossing hundreds of miles of ocean. And their arrival would trigger evolutionary mayhem. At the end of a long night feeding, the female Ai heads back to her nest, where her youngster waits for his nightly grooming session. This is another use for her long fingers. The young Ai will stay with her until fully schooled on the many uses of its own multi-purpose fingers. These Ai's are a living link to Madagascar's ancient past. But they also have something new to offer science. Their ancient DNA shows when lemurs began evolving and helps reveal where they came from. Evolutionary scientist Professor Ann Yoder and her team figured it out. First, they unraveled the II and other lemurs' DNA code.
A, G, G, T, G, C, G, A, A, G, A. So this is very different. Right?
And then compared them to other primates around the world. And they found two living relatives.
Here are lemurs on this side, and their closest relatives are the lorises and the bush babies from Africa. And lorises and lemurs shared a common ancestor.
There you go. How are the babies? How are the babies?
Professor Yoder's DNA detectives had linked lemurs' ancestors back to Africa, but they did not survive there. In Africa, they faced too much competition from newly evolved monkeys and apes. But the genetic window into the past also revealed the approximate date the first lemur arrived in Madagascar.
To the best of our knowledge, lemurs were in Madagascar by 60 million years ago, 60 million years ago, which is a much older age than anyone had assumed.
So we know where they came from and when they arrived. But how did they get here when Madagascar and India separated from Africa about 165 million years ago? The first clue is provided by climate cycles of the Indian Ocean. From January to March, tropical cyclones pound the east coast of Africa. Flooded rivers wash uprooted trees from African forests out into the Indian Ocean. Research proves that millions of years ago, powerful ocean currents swept from Africa to Madagascar and could have carried some of these logs to Madagascar's shores. Could some of these logs have transported small mammals? Surely any mammal would starve or die of dehydration on a 500-kilometer journey. Or maybe not. Deep in the Madagascan forest live lemurs whose behavior could provide some insight. It's the end of the wet season, and mouse lemurs enjoy a feeding frenzy. For weeks, they've gorged themselves on fruits and small insects. They pack on the weight, storing it as fat in their legs and tails. Soon they will need every ounce to keep from starving to death. On the more arid west side of the island, in the Karindi Reserve, the dry season has arrived. For half a year, virtually no rain will fall. Rivers dry up, and food becomes scarce. As leaves disappear, so does the mouse lemur's food, forcing them to retreat to their nesting holes. Lack of food triggers a change in behavior, and this female, fat from her recent feeding frenzy, is ready for the starvation season ahead. She retires to one of the nest holes and prepares to enter a deep sleep. She and her family will hibernate for up to 5 months with no food or water. How is this possible? National Museum of Natural History in Paris, Dr. Jeremy Tarian studies how small lemurs enter hibernation. He's discovered lack of food is the catalyst.
We observed that if we put mouse lemurs under calorie restriction, they were able to enter into torpor.
Torpor is the state of low metabolic activity that occurs in hibernation. And with no breakfast, mouse lemurs can hibernate for just a few hours. Thermal imaging shows their temperature drops dramatically, along with heart and breathing rates. Torpor is an important strategy for mouse lemur survival.
They can save energy like this, and this is really an exceptional ability in a primate species.
Scientists believe that small lemurs' unique talent for torpor might explain how ancestor lemurs could survive the long sea journey from Africa to Madagascar. By November, color returns as the dry season ends. The changing season stirs the mouse lemurs from their hibernation. The little female has slept for over 4 months while her body consumed her stored fat. By December, she has regained weight, mated, and given birth. Twins are the norm, but this time it's triplets. 2 days old and almost blind, the tiny lemurs have no trouble finding milk. They'll depend on their mother for just 8 weeks before going off on their own. We don't know what the first lemurs looked like, but DNA reveals that Madagascar's first stowaways probably numbered not many more than this nestful. Less than a dozen, with as few as 2 females. And from that small group of pilgrims evolved all 100 living species. It took the remarkable coincidence of a cyclone, a floating log, a favorable current, and a tiny cluster of primates that could sleep through hardship to bring the first lemurs to these shores. But then what? What kind of land did they come to? And how would it transform them from just one species to 100? Madagascar is a land of extremes, and the southernmost corner is the driest. This region opens a window into Madagascar's distant past. It's covered in a primitive, spiny forest which thrives where no other plants can. This is the intimidating landscape that confronted the first ancient lemurs. 60 million years ago, Madagascar lay in a high-pressure zone of scorchingly hot, dry air, with virtually no rainfall. And here, the mysterious Ai continues the evolutionary story. Tonight, she will teach her youngster how to crack coconuts for food and juice. When her ancestors first evolved, Madagascar had little water So being adaptable like this probably helped her family survive. Her multi-skilled fingers and self-sharpening teeth hint at how the ancient lemurs adapted to survive the challenges. But the ancient lemur family was about to expand. The island had been steadily moving north at a few centimeters a year. 40 million years ago, Madagascar left the arid high-pressure zone and began to edge its way into the cloud and warm rain of the tropics. Moisture-laden clouds blew in from the ocean, hit the peaks of Madagascar's mountains, and released rain to the parched land. Regular rainfall triggered the growth of the island's first tropical forests and set off an explosion in lemur species. Before the coming of the rain, the ancestral lemurs only produced one side branch on their tree, the eye. As rain generated forests, the family tree sprouted 4 new branches of lemur groups, which still exist today. The lemurids, the indries, the sportive, and the tiny mouse lemurs. Mouse lemur and sportive groups became nocturnal and evolved to feed on everything the new forest had to offer: insects, fruits, flowers, and tree gum. They belonged to bigger lemurs that evolved to feed across large areas of forest. These bigger lemurs were the indries and the brown lemur family. They can dine together without fighting because brown lemurs choose fruit and larger indries prefer leaves. Despite the apparent smorgasbord, Madagascar's first forests grew in poor soil, and the straggly trees bore fewer flowers and less fruit than other tropical forests. To find food, many lemurs evolved strength and agility to move fast along highways in the sky. The indrie can launch itself 10 meters in a single leap. Over millions of years and countless generations, up to 20 new lemur species swung through the branches of expanding forests in search of new foods. But it wasn't just dinner that drove the evolution of the lemur's aerial acrobatics. A new mammal had arrived. In the dry season, the locals gather for drinks at the watering hole. But the mood isn't completely merry. And suddenly, it's clear why. A mongoose crashes the party. A vicious predator with almost supernatural strength for its size. His ancestor arrived from Africa around the time the forests began, most likely the same way the first lemur arrived. Madagascar had no predators then, and lemurs enjoyed a primate paradise. But that was too good to last. These lemurs protect their vulnerable young. But luckily, the striped mongoose rarely climbs trees. But one of its relatives certainly can. All lemurs are on their guard as their mutant enemy approaches. What hellish thing is it? Its whiskers, eyes, and claws resemble a cat's. But it's not a cat. This large, false feline predator evolved from a mongoose. It's called a fossa. The fossa could evolve here because no African cats ever reached Madagascar, and the island food chain had an opening for an apex predator. And so the mongoose ancestor, after many mutations and generations, emerged as a panther-like killer. This is called convergent evolution, where one animal evolves to look and behave like another unrelated animal. The arrival of the fossa's ancestor drove lemur evolution. As the cat-like predator forced them to leap further and faster. And they became hyper-alert. Fossas do most lemur hunting at night, but tonight, this female has other priorities. It's breeding season and she's ready to mate. So bring on the bachelors. Fossas live largely solitary lives, and locating a mate takes planning. But her species evolved a solution unique among mammals. For a start, she sets the rules. Each year, the female climbs to the top of the same tree and produces an alluring cocktail of pheromones to entice all males who catch the scent. As they gather, the strongest male wins the right to climb up to her. If she accepts him, he will spend about 2 hours with her, and then the second strongest male will make the climb. One by one, all the males climb up to be accepted or rejected. Queue jumpers are not tolerated. This unique ritual of female choice has rarely been witnessed, and its origin remains a mystery. One of the many mysteries that surround this cat-like predator that is not a cat. But fossas aren't the only lookalikes to be transformed by convergent evolution in this weird world of mutants. This looks like a hedgehog, yet it is not a hedgehog. This looks like a mole, but it is not. And this shrewish animal is not a shrew. They are all tenrecs, descended from a small insect eater which came from Africa around the same time as the mongoose. Like the mongoose, Madagascar's species factory shaped them into animals not found here. One tenrec pushed the boundaries further than the rest. The aquatic tenrec, or water shrew, evolved from a land mammal and moved into Madagascar's streams and rivers. There it developed a streamlined body and webbed feet, like a mini otter. Its shoe-like whiskers are adapted to detect prey, like this freshwater crab, and it has become a skilled underwater hunter. Tenrecs are among a very small and select number of mammal groups that survived the voyage from Africa to Madagascar. And the island worked its evolutionary enchantment on all of them. But still another change was about to make this island's cauldron of mutant magic boil over again. And the lemur species would explode from 20 to 100 in one extraordinary leap. The forests of Ranamafana National Park hold clues to how lemur species suddenly increased. Primatologist Dr. Patricia Wright has spent over 20 years studying the strange bamboo lemur family. Dr. Wright observed that while all three species eat bamboo leaves, at a certain time of year, they all switch over to eat different parts of the plant.
Look, you can see their teeth marks. Oh, this is great.
The lesser bamboo lemur eats leaf stems, while the greater bamboo lemur uses brute strength to break into the tough bamboo trunk to eat the inner pith layer. Golden bamboo lemurs take the most radical path by going for the bamboo shoots, which hold a deadly poison. Bamboo shoots contain cyanide, 12 times the lethal dose for an animal this size. But golden bamboo lemurs have evolved to process the cyanide in their digestive systems. What forces pushed this lemur to evolve such an extreme diet? And what drives all three bamboo lemurs to switch their diet at the same time?
Every year there are cyclones that come, and then there's long shortages where there's no food available or very little food available, and the lemurs have evolved the ability to be able to find special kinds of food.
It seems climate extremes drive bamboo lemurs to switch and specialize when food is scarce. These climate extremes are recent and were created by a new event on Madagascar's action-packed journey. A geological upheaval located far away from the island. 40 million years ago, Madagascar's position off the coast of Africa stabilized, but India continued moving north until it rammed into southern Asia. That violent collision forced up the land to create the tallest mountains in the world, the Himalayas. The increasing height of the mountains dramatically changed the climate, creating a cycle of extreme weather called the monsoon. Madagascar now had a new climate, a half year of dry and a half year of heavy rain. This seasonal deluge triggered an explosion in lemur species as the land learned to cope with so much water. Up to 300 millimeters of rain a day caused massive flooding on the lowland. As flooding subsided, it created a network of new rivers, dividing the land into a mosaic of small islands. It was on these islands that many new species of lemur evolved. Populations grew apart as they ate what they could find to survive. Isolation and food shortage drove bamboo lemurs to evolve from one species into three. But they weren't the only ones to multiply. Just as DNA revealed that the first expansion of lemur species was caused by changing climate, it also showed the monsoon triggered another boom. And the group that expanded most dramatically were mouse lemurs. It was always thought there were just two species of mouse lemurs. But that idea was recently overturned by Professor Ann Yoder's DNA detectives.
The species diversity within the mouse lemur group is extraordinarily high, and we think there are at least 16 species of these mouse lemurs, and probably more. And we're still in the period of discovery of sampling different areas in Madagascar.
If DNA detectives could identify 16 species, why hadn't anyone noticed them before? Mouse lemurs all look pretty much the same. That's because they are nocturnal. In the dark, eyes see only shape, and appearance and color aren't important. So mouse lemurs have evolved other means to identify their own species. And this little female reveals how it works. It's breeding season, and she's sending a powerful scent signal on the breeze to advertise her readiness to mate. Smell is vital for dark dwellers, and so is sound. The male from the next territory has come to quarter, and they begin to serenade each other. Like bats, their ultrasonic calls lie beyond our hearing range. But we can eavesdrop if we lower them to an audible frequency. These are courtship calls of western mouse lemurs. The eastern mouse lemur has a different language. And the golden brown mouse lemur is different again. These sounds appear to be the only difference between these three species, apart from their DNA. But they are so distinct, they can only reproduce with their own kind. Invisible differences are called cryptic speciation, and they reveal just how subtle, yet distinct the process of evolution was when the monsoons began 8 million years ago.
To give us perspective about what can happen in 8 million years, humans and gorillas diverged about 10 million years ago, and I think we would all agree that there's been a fair amount of morphological change between gorillas and humans in that period of time. Yet in about the equivalent period of time, mouse lemurs physically have not changed at all.
The secrets of lemur diversity don't end here. The discovery of another offshoot of the lemur family puts lemurs among the most prolific mammal mutators on the planet. Southern Madagascar. Ilocos, a province famed for its precious stones, treasure hunters unearthed a secret about Madagascar's past. They discovered that the sapphires they were seeking lay under a layer of semi-fossilized bones, 15,000 years old. So they called in the paleontologists. Dr. Rarzumia Ramanana now works alongside sapphire miners to identify any bones they unearth. And from these diggings has come an exciting discovery.
This is a giant lemur of Madagascar, and now it is extinct.
This is the skull of Indri, the largest living lemur. This is the skull they found, a giant called Megalodarpus. From bone lengths, scientists estimate its weight at close to 100 kilograms, over 10 times the weight of Indri. With its massive size, it would have been slow-moving and far too heavy to leap from branch to branch like its smaller cousins. Megalodarpus was still living alongside Indri until just a few hundred years ago. And then they disappeared. The loss of all giant lemur species coincides with the arrival of another mammal species from across the ocean. Humans arrived around 2,000 years ago and burned the forest to clear land for cultivation. As more and more habitat was lost, the large lemurs were the first to go, as they depended on wider territory and more food. Today, 90% of the island's forests have gone, and some surviving species are under threat from continued habitat loss. On the western side of the island, baobab trees stand staunchly. They can withstand the catastrophe of fire due to their cork-like bark and ability to store moisture in their trunks. Any animal that partners with baobab trees is guaranteeing its future. At the beginning of the wet season, the smallest of the baobabs bursts into bloom with a most spectacular flower. In the sweet synchronization of coevolution, blooming takes place soon after mouse lemurs awaken from their 4-month hibernation. The flowers produce nectar, which attracts the hungry lemurs. It's likely these lemurs developed a taste for nectar while chasing insects on the flowers, and in the process, dipping their tongues into the blooms. The convenience of a food source on tap for mouse lemurs hungry from their hibernation is no coincidence. It's an evolutionary partnership where in return for the sugary feast, mouse lemurs have become major pollinators of these ancient baobabs. Millions of years of mutations have equipped Madagascar's evolutionary heroes with a range of astonishing abilities, which allow them to survive extreme climatic upheavals. ultimate survivor is the Ai, a living link to the lemur's ancient past and its future. The Ai's youngster is learning that his specialized fingers are handy for scooping out sweet jackfruit flesh. Mother and son have been together for almost a year, and soon he will leave her to make his own way in the world. The morning shift takes over, and an Indri baby, which has been riding on his mother's back for the past 4 months, takes his first steps to independence, stealing breakfast from his mom. He'll rely on her forest skills for another few months, and after that, he'll also make his own way in the forests of Madagascar. What kind of world do these young lemurs face? It's changing fast, and their future will be as challenging as that faced by their ancestors when they first arrived on Madagascar's shores. But evolution never ends. The Ai and all of Madagascar's lemurs, the fossa, the Tenrec lookalikes, the ancient chameleons, all the creatures shaped here in Madagascar's species factory are still proving they have what it takes to survive on this mutant planet.